Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Disciple to Faith series. Let's quickly recap where we've been already. We looked at the fact that Jesus discipled people to faith in Him, which also was setting them up for a life of faith in Him. What did He do with the fishermen and tax collectors and zealots that turned them into these awesome apostles, these multiplying disciples? Firstly, we looked at the fact that Jesus lived with His radar up. He had His eyes lifted to see what God was doing, and He was led by the Holy Spirit. We need to do that as well. Secondly, we looked at the significance of proximity. Jesus invited them to be with Him. When Peter and John was before the Sanhedrin, remember, Acts chapter 4, verse 13, they could tell they had been with Jesus. That up close piece really does matter. Okay, in this session, we're going to have a look at the who. Like, who? How do we tell where God is already at work? Are there any hallmarks? Did Jesus have anything to say about this? And the answer is yes, He did. When Jesus sent out the 12, but also when He sent out the 72, we hear these words. And in Luke chapter 10, verses 5 through 7, this is part of sending out the 72 on mission. Jesus said this: "When you enter a house, first say, 'Peace to this house.' If someone who promotes peace is there, your peace will rest on them. If not, it will return to you. Stay there, eating and drinking whatever they give you, for the worker deserves his wages. Do not move around from house to house." Now you might think that's a really interesting statement. Like, how do we make sense of that? The language there, when Jesus sent them out, that what was translated there as if there is a person of peace. The Greek there is a huios Aranes, which literally means a son of peace. And in one of the other Gospels, Jesus used the language in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus used the language of a worthy person, but He still set it up in exactly the same way. Now I can imagine when Peter and John were going out the first time, or when some of the 72 were sent out for the first time, they're walking out there to a village, and I can imagine Peter and John looking at one another and saying, how on earth are we going to figure out who this person of peace, this huios Aranes, this son of peace, how are we going to find them? It's not like they've got like a flashing neon sign above their house or above their head. And they went and they were sharing the good news of the kingdom. And all of a sudden in the gathering, there was one person who had a few more questions. One person, maybe their head was on a different angle. And that one person would have said to them, "Hey, what are you guys doing for lunch? Or where are you staying tonight?" That one person would have offered to serve them. "Come to my place. You're really welcome. You're really welcome. I'd like to provide you with a meal. I'd like to provide you with accommodation." That hallmark is one of the markers of God being at work in their heart. You need to pay attention to this. Now let me summarize it back and put it very simply. A person of peace in your world, they like you, they listen to you, and they'll serve you. Okay, let me give an illustration of that. Gentleman in my street that I decided to disciple to faith in Jesus, and he did put his faith in Jesus. It all began through our connecting at Christmas parties, street Christmas parties. And this gentleman was just a little bit more interested. He knew that both my wife and I were pastors, and he had a few more questions about all of that. So I could tell he liked us, and he listened to us. There was a mutuality in that, just the chemistry was good. But also, he would mow the grass out the front of my house on the street in Australia. That's called your nature strip. And he would mow that. The reason he would mow it is because our next door neighbours are his in-laws. He'd mow theirs, and without me ever asking, he'd just push it another 5 or 6 metres, and he'd do mine as well. He'd actually done it for years. He liked me, he listened to me, and he served me. And when I got twigged to this type of information and my radar went up, I went, "Oh, I think he might be a person of peace." I began to pray for him. And as it turned out, he certainly was a person of peace. Let me tell you about Peter, a man from the church where I'm the pastor. Peter had done this type of training, and he was a retired man, about 70 years old. And he was standing there with his fishing rod, and because he was Peter the fisherman, a casual fisherman. And he was actually frustrated with what he'd heard, and he was talking to God about it. And he said, "I don't have anyone in my world who's a person of peace." He said, "Mostly I only know Christians." And he was kind of frustrated with those feelings of it never works for me, and I can't do all this sort of thing. And then he kind of glanced sideways, and the fisherman just standing a few meters away, who also fished regularly, he kind of glanced sideways and he said to himself, well, he likes me. He listens to me. And then Peter said to himself, but he doesn't serve me. Well, while Peter was fishing, he was flexing his left knee because it was a bit sore. And the other fisherman said to him, what's wrong with your knee? And Peter said, I have a bit of pain in it. And the other fisherman put down his fishing pole and came over. The other fisherman was actually medically trained. And he was down on his hands and knees, and he was pushing and pulling on Peter's knee. Does this hurt? Does this hurt? And all of a sudden in Peter's mind, he went, oh no, he's serving me as well. And so Peter threw out just a more generic spiritual statement like, oh, God bless you, mate. I'm grateful for that. The other man, as he picked up his fishing pole, looked at Peter and said, oh, are you into spiritual stuff? Peter goes, oh yeah, I am. Now the guy says, I'm really into spiritual stuff. He says, I've read the Quran, I've read Hindu texts, I've read the Bible and Buddhist stuff. The other fisherman says to Peter, I think Christianity is the best of them, but I'm not one. So Peter takes a deep breath and he says, I am one. The guy says, really? Peter goes, oh yeah, and they have a quick chat. So then Peter takes a really deep breath and he crosses the line. He says, I'm actually looking for someone to read the Bible with. Don't know whether you'd be interested in that. The guy said, I'd really enjoy doing that with you. Now we're going to be touching more on how you do that as we push on into the series, but you only have to fast forward that tape about 6 weeks or so, and Peter discipled that other gentleman to faith in Jesus, and just a month or so after that, he baptized him. Now for Peter, that was like an explosion in his heart, because Peter would never have thought himself as an evangelist. Peter actually wasn't very gifted or good at being an evangelist, but anyone can be a disciple maker. And this is the point. You can be a disciple maker. I can be a disciple maker. That whole zone of discipling a person to faith is accessible to anybody. Now, a couple of quick thoughts about a person of peace. Firstly, they are not generic. They are a person of peace to you because they like you. If you've got someone sitting with you, look at them right now and say, they're not your person of peace, they're my person of peace. Because they don't like the person sitting beside you, they like you. That is a big deal. It's to do with chemistry. It's to do with timing. It's to do with proximity. They're not just generically a person of peace to everybody, they're a person of peace to you. Now, when you realize that, you start to realize that God Himself is at work in your relational network, at your work or club or street, and you are the unique conduit of the message of God, the life and love of God into their lives. God has placed you in that network, and you are the unique person to disciple them to faith. That is a really big deal. It's not like there's a whole lot of people out there who could, for whom they're a person of peace. No, they are a person of peace to you. Secondly, it's really important to realize that a person of peace is time framed. In other words, there is a moment. There is a moment. In Mark chapter 1, verse 15, Jesus speaks and He says, the time has come. And that little word there, it's the word kairos. It's different to chronos, which is a different Greek word, which is like the passing of time, the chronology of time. But a kairos moment is a punctiliar point in time. It's like a dot in contrast to a line. Now, this idea of a kairos moment coming, there is a moment. And if you will live with your radar up to be guided by God, if you'll be sensitive to the Holy Spirit, and you'll acknowledge that there are people in your proximity, and if you're going to disciple them, giving them access to your life is a big deal. The timing is really important. Every one of us who are a parent realize how significant timing is with the parenting of our children. And sometimes when we have to say, stop, because we don't want them to cross the road, like timing is everything. And so it is when you're guided by the Holy Spirit and with a person of peace. Number one, the person is not generic. They're a person of peace to you. Number two, the timing matters because something could be happening in their life in that moment, and that's why God is saying to you, speak to them now. I remember having a uni student say to me, she was sitting on the train. She was maybe 19 years old. She said she was dressed in really kind of casual, some gym clothes. And as she was sitting on the train, she watched a woman step onto the carriage who was every inch the executive. She was dressed immaculately, she was sharp, but she was in her 50s. And as the woman stepped onto the train carriage, this young lady felt the Holy Spirit saying to her, I want you to speak to her about Jesus. And the young lady was all intimidated about this. She was a Christian, the young woman. She was all intimidated about this. But then as the woman made her way through the carriage, she ended up sitting exactly opposite her. Now, I don't know what it's like in your country, but in Australia, you don't speak to someone on a train. And so she was sitting there and she's wrestling with God. The young woman's wrestling with God. Oh, God, I can't do it. Look, she looks like an executive and I'm 19. She's dressed professionally, I'm dressed sloppily. And she's making a million excuses, just like Moses at the burning bush. And finally, she kind of thinks, oh no, look, I think I better do something about that. And she looks at the woman who's got her face next to a window, and the woman is looking out the window and a tear is coming down the executive woman's cheek. And the young lady went, oh my goodness, it really is God. God knows what's happening in her heart and in her life. And that's why God spoke to me. So she's having her, oh wow, only God can do this moment. So she started to take a few deep breaths to get herself ready. Okay, I'm going to do it, God. What do you want me to say? And all that sort of stuff. And as she was getting herself all prepared, because she'd been arguing with God for so long, the train pulled into a station. The executive woman stood up and walked off. And the young lady said, I never said one word to her. I missed the moment. The Kairos moment was there. So I just want you to realize this. There are people in your world. They are people of peace to you. And there'll be an exact moment, there'll be a right moment where you just need to cross that chicken line. Take a deep breath and say, God, here I am. I'm ready, because you too can disciple people to faith in Jesus.